Ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, your host, Tim Binnall.
No commercials, no subscriptions, no network, no rules, and at the end of the day, my friends, no comparison. Welcome to another edition of BOA The Revival. Really excited about tonight's program. It should be a lot of fun. Chad Lewis is our guest, and he's just got a tremendous resume. I was just telling him before we came on the air, I'm like, look, dude, we're going to have to do greatest hits here, dude, because I thought my paranormal passport was packed, but his is beyond the pale. He's been all over the place. He's looked at all kinds of stuff. I love a good paranormalist. You know, Chad, I was thinking the other day, I was looking for different guests from like different states and stuff, and it was like it's very hard to find someone who kind of knows all the stuff. They're either a ghost person or a Bigfoot person or whatever. It's like so I appreciate a good paranormalist, and Chad Lewis is a top-notch paranormalist. He's looked at all kinds of stuff, and we're going to get into it all here tonight on the show. So welcome to the show, Chad. Really excited about talking to you tonight here on Binnall of America.
Greetings from the back roads of Wisconsin.
There you go. Wow, I like this. He came prepared, folks. Yeah, Chad and I we've crossed paths, I think, on social media here and there over the years, and I've seen your name in different places, but it's like I don't know, it's never got you on the show. And now as I'm digging in, I'm like, holy shit, how'd I miss this guy? This fucking guy's amazing. So, tell me, who is Chad Lewis? Give me the bio, the background. You know, how did you get mixed up in all this? You've been doing this for like 30 years, right?
Yeah, my background is in the field of psychology, but for the last 30 years, you're right, I've been traveling the world in search of the strange and unusual. And I blame it on my home state of Wisconsin, because not only do we have the UFO capital of the world here, we have three of them, three different cities. Yeah. So when I was in high school, I grew up near one of those capitals, and I would hear of people seeing UFOs and reporting it. So the following fall, I started studying psychology at college and joined the Mutual UFO Network. And that's what I was really interested in, why some people believe in the supernatural or paranormal and others do not.
Yeah.
So I started researching that and mostly presenting my findings at college research symposiums, really boring statistical stuff. I mean, I always joke that you're glad you weren't there type thing. But what I found in the audience is that people would come up to me and say, I need help. My home's haunted, or I saw some creature in the woods I can't identify. Can you help research it? So that really got me twisted more toward, why they're believing in it or not, to what are they actually experiencing it. And that continued through graduate school. I ended up doing my master's thesis on students' belief in the supernatural.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And you hit it on the head just earlier in the intro that when I started out, and probably when you did as well, that it was like you only did ghost research, or you were a cryptid person, or ufologists wanted nothing to do with anyone else that didn't do UFOs. So I was really influenced early on when Jerome Clark's The Unexplained book came out. And for many of your listeners who might remember that, it was one of those books where one night you could read about fairies, the next night weird things falling from the sky, and then some swamp monster. Yeah. It covered everything, and it opened my eyes. And I thought, wow, maybe there is room in this field for someone, like you said, that loves everything.
Yeah. I've noticed over the years. Well, it's funny. When I started, it was like the people who crossed over were kind of few and far between. Then there was kind of a period where it was happening a lot, and then everything kind of got divided up again. So it's weird. But yeah, I like folks who can look at all the different stuff. And like I said, your stuff's amazing. Now just to do due diligence here, you got a new book that's out. This show's coming out in May or June. I'm not sure. I'm debating taking May off. I don't know. So bear with me with that. But you have a book that's coming out in early June, Supernatural Lake Superior. So let's plug that right away here so folks know about that. What is this? Is Lake now I feel like an idiot. I don't even know where Lake Superior. I know it's part of the Great Lakes. Does it belong to Michigan or Wisconsin? I don't know, folks. I don't know anything about this stuff. But Supernatural Lake Superior is the book, and it's out now-ish.
Yes, and I grew up in Wisconsin, one of the states surrounded by Lake Superior. And for those listeners who don't know, Lake Superior is gigantic. I mean, it's 350 miles wide or long. It's about 160 miles wide. If the largest freshwater lake by surface area in America, just to give you an idea, if you took the other Great Lakes of Michigan, Huron, Ontario, and Erie, you'd have to combine all of them, throw in 3 more Lake Eries till you get to the volume of Lake Superior.
Oh, wow.
That's how big it is, bigger than all of them combined. And
that's why
it runs from Wisconsin up the Minnesota border into Ontario, Canada, and then back around through Michigan. To give you an idea, it kind of surrounds the states.
Now I'm seeing it. Yeah, now I'm seeing it in my mind's eye. You have the Great Lakes. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I'd always grown up hearing stories of how supernatural it was and that it seemed to have this uncanny pull toward people that when they go there, they felt like they were just drawn there. They have to be there, which is why so many people just uproot their lives and move there, saying, I have to relocate somewhere along the lake. It's just this magical, mystical place.
Oh, weird. Interesting. All right. So that's the book, Supernatural Lake Superior. Different stories and accounts of weird stuff that's happened there, I take it.
And there's a ton of books out on Lake Superior and Supernatural, but the overwhelming majority focus on ghost ships. Because so many ships met their watery grave on the lake, that's the thing that gets focused on. People are most excited about ghost ships and maybe a couple haunted lighthouses, but all the rest gets forgotten. It doesn't get covered. And on all of my trips around Lake Superior, I was finding stories of cryptids, the Wendigo, Men in Black, UFO sightings, mermaids, all this stuff that was never included in these books that were meant for, the couple going to the haunted lighthouse bed and breakfast to spend the night as a fun little getaway. Nothing for serious researchers. So finally, after years of researching Superior, I said, I need to put this all into one book and not leave Canada out as most American books do.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about the mermaid, dude. You can't tease me with the mermaid. We'll give people a little taste of what's in the book. What's this mermaid story?
So this story goes back to the 1700s. Some French voyagers were traveling north of Minnesota, just over the border in Canada by Thunder Bay. And they were out on a place called Pie Island. And they had picked up an indigenous woman that they were transporting in their canoes. And she kind of served as a guide of sorts. And they were setting up base camp along the edge of the island when it was just getting dark, when out on the water, one of the gentlemen saw what appeared to be a young boy of about teenage age sitting on a rock of some sort, but they thought it was really weird because although the top half of his torso looked like a boy, the bottom half was that of a fish or a serpent. And of course, the guy takes out his rifle. He's going to blast this thing thinking none of his friends would believe that he had just seen a mermaid.
Yeah.
And the indigenous woman kind of grabs him and says, no, we don't do that. That's ill fate. That we think these things are supernatural, that they are protectors of the water, that they have the ability to shapeshift, of course, but more importantly, they can manipulate and control the weather. So if you harm them, they'll just rain down on you with everything they have. So, and this guy's pretty upset because he wants proof of it. So he never gets to claim his prize, and the merfolk, the being, the merman, if you will, just simply descended into Lake Superior. But for the next several days, they were still hit with thunderous storms that they were unable to even travel because the storms were so devastating on the shoreline there that they could do nothing but just hunker down in their lodging. So even though they didn't shoot at the mermaid, and we only know this because it was covered in a Canadian magazine in 1824, where the gentleman who had the experience testified in a Canadian court under oath that what he was saying was true, as a French Canadian trapper voyager moving through, and the mermaid. And a lot of people equate it to more of the sirens, the old stories of these beautiful sirens of the sea luring sailors to the rocky shorelines where they would crash and meet their fate. But this seemed to be something altogether different, where there were no beautiful singing reported.
Yeah.
And it was that of a male species. At least that's what the Voyager could make out.
Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder if it's sort of like the phenomenon manifests as something that would be at least relatively recognizable in a sense. You know what I mean? Where it's like maybe if maybe the guy wouldn't expect a Bigfoot, so it wouldn't manifest as a Bigfoot. So it's like, what would a trapper like 200 years ago? What's in their mental vernacular of weird things that could manifest? You know what I mean?
Yes, and I wish we would have more on this. That was there weird sightings of lights with it? Was there other sightings? I mean, so much of that is left out. And I even find that in today when I'm researching, if I go to a place that is known for, let's say, Bigfoot sightings, and I start talking to someone asking if they had ever heard of the big muddy monster, the Bigfoot creature. And if you leave it at that, they might just say, nope, never heard of that story. But if you kind of broaden it again of, oh, I'm collecting weird stories. I know there's a Bigfoot story around here, but I'm interested in urban legends, folklore, strange stories. And then all of a sudden the person, the person might just say, oh, I don't know about the Bigfoot, but there's an abandoned old haunted house on the outskirts of town. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Once you get people the opportunity to tell their story, it's they jump at it, and often it's something you don't expect. Now, what I didn't expect here was as I said, I'm just amazed at the places you've been and the things you've looked at, and generally, I like to think that I have pretty strong knowledge of these things. Then I saw this on your bio here, Tata Duende in Belize and Guatemala. So this is a completely unheard of creature to me. I was like, wait a minute, what is this? I've never even heard of the Tata Duende, and I have to, I had to get on the Google machine and look it up. But so this is like a cryptid that you went to look for in Belize and Guatemala, sort of looked into there.
Yeah, this creature is inhabiting Central and South America, but is heavily well known in Central America. And they see it as a diminutive creature, 4 feet tall-ish, and it's a protector of their jungles and forest over there. That it's often small. It seems almost too fantastical to exist, where it wears a oversized sombrero, that its feet are pointed backwards, apparently, so nobody can track it, even though everybody knows its feet are pointed backwards.
Ah, yeah.
It carries a big machete, and apparently it only has 4 fingers and no thumbs. So they advise people that if you go looking for it and you do encounter it, if it waves at you, if you wave back, tuck your thumbs in behind your hand and kind of wave with the back of your hand out. So it will not see your thumbs, because folklore tells that if it does, it gets irate that you have thumbs and it'll come and try to rip them off of you. I mean, all these little quirky things about folklore.
That's crazy. Wow. The Tata Duende.
And oftentimes he'll be playing a guitar or a banjo. And of course, it's supernatural. It can lure you to sleep, or kind of like being fairy led into the fairy realm. that's exactly what it does. And I was amazed because when you travel to other places, oftentimes you find that they take their folklore in a more serious tone than we do here in America.
Right, right.
You know, we're putting Sasquatch on beef jerky, but there they would often say, don't go looking for the duende. Stay away from it. What are you doing? Crazy American, stop it. But I ended up speaking with a gentleman. I was at the equivalent of a U.S. national park there, and I was talking about the duende, and the guy kind of froze. He was a younger forest ranger, and said he grew up in the area, and he told me a story that when he was a kid, he was in his backyard playing with all the neighbor kids, and they kind of butted up against the national park, the heavy forest, and they were just playing. It was starting to get later, and all of a sudden they saw the duende on the edge of the forest, and it seemed to be singing to them and kind of waving like, come here type thing. And all the kids kind of looked at it and they were frightened. But this guy told me that he kind of fell under the duende's spell, that he started walking toward it. And all of a sudden his mother popped her head out the door and yelled, you know, come home for dinner. And that snapped him out of his spell. And he was crying, and he ran home telling his mother he had seen the duende, and he sketched out a depiction of what he had seen. And he made me promise that when I was done in the forest, in the woods that day, to come back and check back in with him to make sure I had survived. And he was serious. He wanted me to come back because he was concerned I might just never be found.
Oh my God. So you went down to these countries and just went into the woods, like, to see it, I don't know, to walk in the footsteps of the duende?
That's exactly right. And in all of these locations, you know, deep in my mind, I feel like I'm safe. Like the duende's not going to get me. I'm not going to be attacked by a werewolf or a vampire. But at the same time, my rational mind gets put on this back burner, and you know, every little branch or twig snapping in the woods all of a sudden has your mind conjuring up images. So part of it for me is that I'm always getting scared at these places. And I often joke that if you're not getting scared, you're not trying hard enough, because these places are just downright creepy. And I heard from so many people that were just so fearful of the duende. They thought it was something that you don't mess around with. That kind of that old adage that when you go looking for the weird will come looking for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Yeah. It's sort of in line with a lot of the little people cases. And now that I'm looking, duende, I do cover a lot of like goblin type cases through coast to coast. And yeah, they're more prevalent. And it's funny, you don't really see as many like goblin-y type cases around here anymore, except for like the Pukwudgie sort of lore that still exists. But it's like down in these other countries, there's quite a few sort of like folkloric goblins running around.
And most of the time they're seen as something you would not want to encounter.
Right.
That there are several tales though, and the duende is thought to be a protector of the jungle. So if you're doing any harm, he'll come after you. But there are tales of crazy Americans like myself getting turned around in the forest and hopelessly lost, and the duende leads them back to safety.
Oh.
Much like, you know, hellhounds and devil dogs, there are stories of in Central America of cadejos, they call them, and some are black and some are white, and some will guide you back if you get drunk in the village, and they'll guide you home, and others, of course, will take your life. So you never know. Just like the little people.
Yeah.
I guess you never know if you're going to run into the trickster type or the benevolent type.
Yeah. Well, I like to hope that if like you're not up to no good, I don't know, it's a double negative there, but if you're on a peaceful sort of, if you get like lost in the woods, they'll help you out. I like to hope, but who knows? You know, it's pretty crazy. Now, and forgive me because I have the book. I haven't really dug into it because I've been wanting to do sort of a dedicated episode to this, and I should have before we sat down talking. We're not going to do a dedicated episode to it tonight, but we are going to get into the Van Meter Visitor, because you and a couple other guys, and I don't have their, where are they? Here, there it is. You and Kevin Lee Nelson and Noah Voss put out this book, The Van Meter Visitor, which is, I think it's kind of the seminal Van Meter book. Like, I remember when it came out, I'm like, oh, finally, a Van Meter mystery book, Van Meter Visitor book. I was so excited, but, life gets in the way. So, but as I said, everywhere I go, I see this book. It is the book on the Van Meter Visitor. How did you kind of get mixed up in this and decide to write about this crazy case?
Yeah. Well, you sound just like me, where I have a stack of books that I just need to read, but of course I'm always getting more. But so years ago, my colleagues Kevin and Noah and I were going to go to Iowa for a legend trip, an extended weekend legend trip of checking out just local legends we hadn't been to before. And we had already compiled a couple cursed cemeteries and a haunted bridge and some UFO sightings, but there wasn't that big anchor legend of something you could really dig into. Like, let's make that our focus and hit some of these others along the way. So I had done a series of several books on odd newspaper stories from the 1800s and early 1900s, focusing on bizarre deaths, UFOs, mysterious creatures, odd people, and the like. Just stories that are unbelievable from the past. And years ago, I had started an Iowa one that I just never got around to finishing. So I thought, why don't I just start digging through? I have a whole pile of hundreds of these printed out stories. Why don't I dig through? Maybe there's something I'm missing that could serve as that anchor for our trip.
Yeah.
And I'm flipping through, and all of a sudden I see these stories that I had printed out and just forgotten about, of a monster of awful form, a creature terrorizing this small town of Van Meter, Iowa back in 1903. And I started reading them and I thought, yep, this is our anchor. This is amazing, because the story told of a giant 8-foot bat-like creature terrorizing the small town of Van Meter, Iowa for 5 nights. And the townsfolk said it had a horn on its head. It could project light. It could erase people's memories. They shot at it with everything they had. It had no effect on the creature. So immediately you get a story so bizarre like that. And kind of all the other legends for that trip were thrown out, and we said, we're going right to Van Meter.
It's a crazy story. It really is. Like, I can't think of, the only sort of contemporaneous, even, and now it's a long time ago, really, but like, it's almost reminds me a little of like the monster up here in Massachusetts, the Dover Demon, where it was like they saw it for like a week and then they never really saw it again. It's a very weird story. Like, you don't really see this thing pop up anywhere else either. It's a strange story.
And we were amazed because we showed up in town, and the town's about 900 people. It's terribly small, just about 20 minutes southwest of Des Moines, and popped into the tiny little library and met the library director of the time, Jolena Welker. And we thought this was going to be easy. We're going to get there and find out it had to be a hoax. It was too bizarre not to be, and that we just go about our business with other things. And what we found is that a lot of the people, believe it or not, had no idea the history of the story. It had been nearly forgotten.
I bet. Yeah, it must have been about a century ago, right? Well,
1903. And we were there, nearly 100 years later. So yeah, it had been forgotten, and there's no real history museum there or anything, a historical society that would have kept it going. And started digging through, and right away just started noticing that a lot of the witnesses who had seen it were the most prominent men in the community. You had business owners, a doctor, the town's bank manager, the postmaster of the post office. So you had people that, and remember, this was 1903, where your reputation was your calling card. That's all you really had.
Yeah.
So there was a point in the middle of the week when the bank manager barricaded himself in the bank building because he thought that the creature was actually bank robbers trying to steal the town's money. So he sat and staked out the bank all night in In the middle of the night, he sees this bright light flashing in the bank, moving back and forth like it was searching for something or maybe someone. And all of a sudden, he sees this 8-foot bird-like creature in front of the light, and he's so terrified, he has his shotgun filled with buckshot. He blasts out the front window of the bank shooting at this thing. And it simply disappeared as soon as he shot it. And of course, he didn't have the nerve to come out until the safety of the morning daylight the next morning. And when he did, he was expecting to find a carcass of a bank robber or some animal, fur, feathers, blood, something, but there was nothing there. But on the side of the building, there were giant 3-toed tracks in the mud. Like some giant 3-toed creature was there. And I bring this up because it brings me back to the reputation that I don't know how many people would want to put their life savings in a bank where the manager's blasting out the window at giant bat creatures.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now, since the town has kind of embraced this now, though, right? I mean, they have a festival and everything. It seems like they're kind of like now on board with their claim to fame.
Yes, they're doing their 12th annual festival this year. It's always the last Saturday in September, kind of on the anniversary or as close as you can get on a Saturday to when the sightings originally occurred. But this is the exact opposite of what it was like in 1903, because once the story broke, the people of Van Meter said, don't come here. There's nothing to see. This is all overblown. Yes, we've been shooting at something. There's some ghost stories, but don't worry about it. So either they were the best advertisers using reverse psychology on people, or they simply did not want to capitalize on it.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, because it's, and like you were saying, like it didn't come. I mean, you guys can, I think, be credited with putting this on the map as far as, because I don't really remember hearing much about the Van Meter visitor up until this book came out. So yeah, it certainly wasn't something like I heard about growing up as a kid. You know what I mean? It's definitely in the zeitgeist of weird.
And same with us, that we always say that we didn't discover it, we redug it up. You know, literally rediscovered it after somebody had already discovered it in 1903, because, you know, back then on the last night, I mean, the entire town, there was a brick and tile factory out working 3 shifts, 8-hour shifts of men. And right next to it was this abandoned coal mine where the town thought the thing must have been using as its lair. And so on the 5th night, they go out there and they hear the sounds of what they claimed were Satan and a regiment of his imps coming up from hell to wage war on Van Meter. And now this thing was there, but it had a smaller version with it, a version of itself, maybe the female gender or an offspring, but they flew off and did whatever they did that night. But just before daybreak, they were coming back, and the townsfolk blasted them with everything they had. The newspaper said they could have sunk the Spanish fleet. They shot at them so many times. But whether these people were the worst shots in Iowa or these things were impervious to their weapons, where they simply went back into the coal mine, and then like a great Hollywood movie, the cliffhanger, that's where it ended. Right. The newspaper said the townsfolk were going to try to figure out how to best kill these things, but there were no further stories. Like, they just left it there. We don't know if they did kill them, if they left them there, or if these things flew off to become the Mothman of Point Pleasant. Who knows?
Yeah.
So that was fascinating too. And there were so many things that were ahead of its time in Van Meter. And what I mean by that is one night, a gentleman saw this thing. It seemed to be sleeping on a telephone pole, and he took great aim at it. He let his eyes, it was only 15 feet away, but he let his eyes adjust to the darkness, because this thing, as far as we know, only came out at night. And he blasted it, but instead of killing it, it seemed to just wake this thing up. It trained its light right on this guy, and then the gentleman said that he was hit with a stench, some odor, that as soon as he hit this, his memory was erased. So this weird fog, steam, whatever it was, came, the smell hit him, completely erased his memory. And luckily his gunshot woke up another guy who saw it then using its beak like a parrot, climbing down the telephone wire, the pole, and then it just stood up on Main Street Van Meter, started running on all fours, spread its wings, and flew off to the old abandoned coal mine. And this guy was the hardware store, O.V. White hardware store owner, so he had some credibility as well. And it's just amazing. But, there were no follow-up stories, even like 20 years later. Nobody even, you'd think somebody would say, hey, do you remember that time we all fought that giant bat-like creature?
Yeah, that's the weirdest part about it. I mean, the thing I don't know. I guess the skeptical thing, not from me, but I thought I heard like that people just kind of wave it off like, oh, it was just a fanciful thing that they made up in the paper for a week or whatever. To me, it was, I don't know why they would say like that's just such a cheap way of dismissing the story. I mean, if it was in the paper, that wasn't like this was like when you're looking in the papers there. It wasn't like every year there was a fucking monstrous creature that showed up where you could kind of be like, oh, it's Monstrous Creature Week where they make up a phony story. It was like, why would this one isolated thing be, it's like the newspaper had a reputation for writing fanciful stories, right?
That's correct. And I've done so many books on old newspaper stories where a lot of them were exaggerated, embellished, or just outright made up. But oftentimes they would lack any details. And this had everybody's name who had witnessed it. And I started cross-referencing, and sure enough, this person did exist. Here's their photograph. We know they lived in Van Meter at that time. They were prominent businessmen and had a great reputation. And so everything was falling into place. But with the book, the three of us looked at, every explanation you could possibly think of, from mass hallucinations to maybe they misidentified a sandhill crane or a turkey vulture or all these things. And one of my favorite things since the book came out a few years back is how many people contact me with their theory of what it was. Which I love. I love it because I'm as puzzled today as I was when I first went there, that it's unlike any other story I've ever stumbled across, and I'm left with more questions than answers. So when people say, oh, I think it was, something they released from the coal mine accidentally, like something out of the horror movie The Descent or something. I love those legends. I love those stories. And we had always hoped that when the book came out, somebody would be going through grandpa or grandma's journal or diary and stumble across this story that they had been there in Van Meter and maybe had a photograph. And apparently someone took a cast of one of the giant three-toed footprints. But if the cast was ever taken, it's been lost to history. And we were hoping maybe somebody had that in their attic or basement. But as of yet, knock on wood, we haven't found it.
Yeah, it's remarkable that there's nobody like who was like, you can't like trace the genealogy. Like there's nobody still in town that was related to the people from the original story, right?
We didn't find any. A few people had moved away, but they didn't have any relics or any family memorial stuff. But we were hoping, again, the town's 900. People usually, like a lot of small towns, they end up leaving and then heading off somewhere else. And we were really hoping, but I had never encountered anything like this before. And the fact that when we went there, we even struggled to find photographs of what the town looked like at that time.
Oh,
that
wow.
There were no historical files of, we know the bank was there and it's still there, but it's now a law firm, but the vault is still there and they preserved it beautifully. But a fire had torn through the town several times after this. So many of the buildings are gone and moved around. But I love it because the festival, it takes place right at the site. And Van Meter's only about 3 blocks long, the downtown.
Yeah.
I think they have 2 or 3 businesses. That's it. So you don't need a great imagination to feel what it was like back in 1903. You can just walk down and say, oh, there's the bank vault where they shot out the window, or here's the old abandoned brick and tile factory. I see it right there. That's where they blasted this creature. So I think that sets it apart as well, is that you can go there and you feel like you've been transported back 120 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can kind of. I've been meaning. That's kind of on my bucket list, Van Meter, to check out. But it reminds me in a way of Point Pleasant, not just because the creatures are kind of similar, but also, I was there a few years ago, met up with Steve Ward, who was so taken with the story that he moved to the area to work at the museum. And he took us out to the TNT area. He took us out to where the first sighting happened, the old road. And it was it's really something else you hear these stories and everything. But when you're standing, he's like, well, the car was there and Mothman was here. And you're standing where the Mothman was. You're literally standing where they fucking saw the Mothman. It's a cool experience if anyone ever wants to. And I feel a feeling you've gone to so many different weird places. I'm sure you've been to Point Pleasant. So, but it's a really remarkable feeling, like with the Van Meter thing, when you're there and you can kind of put yourself in the shoes of the creature and the people who encountered it.
I have to encourage anybody, if they have the means and the desire, to go to some of these places, because
Absolutely.
You can read about it. You can watch YouTube videos of it, documentaries, TV shows, but to actually be there is a whole different experience where you soak in everything the witness or the researchers had spotted. It just gives a different feel that you cannot get through any other means. And I realize for a lot of people, they're not spending every day traveling around the world to these weird locations, but if you can tie it in, say you have a family road trip and, we're passing right by Van Meter. Well, let's stop in for an hour just to take a quick view.
Yeah.
I think it's well worth it. You really get a feel of what could have happened. Just something that, again, at least personally, I don't get by reading or watching it.
Yeah, no, believe me, I'm of the same ilk. I kind of came into that realization. A bunch of guys in the Paranormal, we kind of take these annual trips to these, kind of like what you were saying about what you did with Van Meter, legend trip to different locations. And as you sort of do more and more of them, it's there's really no other experience like being in the place where it happened, Dealey Plaza is a great example. I know I'm not on your list there, but it's that's another one where it's okay, now I can kind of get an understanding of what the fuck they've been talking about for all these years. It's really it's enlightening.
Early on when I started out, and I think a lot of people feel the same way, started researching in this field, is that they thought, or at least I naively thought, oh, this will be easy. I'm going to solve this case. I'll figure out what's going on with this one. And at least for me, that never happened, where early on, I really shifted from, trying to solve these things, quote unquote, to enjoying the legend, enjoying the adventure of it. Because I would go to a lot of these places, especially hauntings, and for me, nothing would happen when I was there. Yeah. A lot of my colleagues kind of got burned out because they did so much that nothing happened, where I started shifting and seeing it as the adventure of it. Like you were saying, you and your buddies getting together, hitting the back roads. Maybe you see a roadside attraction of the world's biggest Paul Bunyan or something of that nature. You're stopping at these mom and pop restaurants. And oftentimes people contact me telling me stories of their adventures to these places where the most memorable stuff didn't happen at the legend. It happened on the way there or the way back. So yeah, I think if you can appreciate that amount too, you'll never be disappointed if you do happen to go somewhere and the chupacabra doesn't attack you.
Well, actually, dude, it's not on your bio here, but you did a video about a spook light in Tennessee, Chapel Hill. And when we were down there in Nashville last year, I think we went out to Chapel. We watched your video. We went out to Chapel Hill, and it was interesting. And we didn't really see any spook light, but what was the weird part was like on the road there, we all stopped, park our cars, get out. Like this dude drives, but we thought it was going to be the cops or something, but he was just going down this really remote fucking road. Then no one came by the whole time. Then right as we're getting in our cars to leave, a different car comes up the other way. And it was just kind of like, what's going on here? What? This is weird. Like, why did that seem really more out of the ordinary than anything? It's like, all right, they kind of like want us to get out of town, or what's going on here? This is weird. But yeah, weird stuff happens when you're kind of out there. Especially when you kind of not expect it or you don't know what it's going to look like.
That's exactly the truth. And that's the part I love. I was in Joplin, Missouri at the Hornet Spook Light, or the Joplin Spook Light. And I must have been, 30 years old at the time. And these young teenagers were out there and they were trying to tell me about snipe hunting, of going out trying to get the snipe. And I kind of looked at these young kids like, I'm a grizzled veteran. You're not going to fool me with the snipe hunting. I should be telling you about the snipe. So I thought that was funny, but you just run into odd characters and weird stuff happens. And I always equate it to, going fishing, that maybe something will happen or not, but you're not going to catch a fish if you're not out on the lake.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I know it's disheartening sometimes for a lot of people if they go to places over and over and nothing seems to happen or they're not excited by it. But again, for me, at least, shifting that perspective of, I love the adventure of all this. And I don't mean this in a terrible way, but at some point for me, the idea of whether or not this happened to somebody is secondary to the legend itself and what it means. Because I can never prove or disprove if somebody told me they saw, a werewolf running down the road at night. They might have seen it. They might not have. I don't know. It's really hard to prove or disprove that. I wasn't there, but I love what it tells us about us as a culture, as a people, and how these stories morph and progress. They're never stagnant. Folklore is always changing. And for me, and an example, you go to a town and I would talk to some old timers about a legend and they would tell me the legend, all the different stories they had. Then you talk to some teenagers in that same area. They have a completely different version of the legend because it's changed over 7 decades.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty awesome. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Now I'm going to assume, and I am referring to your bio because you have fantastic sort of coverage of all these different places. These are all sort of scattershot. Did you go through a period where you were like, okay, I'm really into sea serpents now, and I'm gonna, because you've gone to like all these different places to look for these different lake monsters or sea serpents or whatever. But did you go through like a period where it was like, all right, I'm doing haunted places now. Now I'm into UFOs. Now I'm into sea serpents. Was this kind of like all different, as just sort of as the road unfolded?
My interest and my taste have shifted and circled back many times on themselves, where I started out really interested in UFOs. And as I said, I joined the Mutual UFO Network when I was a young man. And that was my big research ambition, UFOs. And then that slowly turned into some ghost stuff and then cryptids. And then it went back to UFO. So that's a circle. But in terms of research, it's always something that I love, like going to Loch Ness or Transylvania, or here in the States, going to Roswell, but then saying, what else is around there or on the way that makes the trip well worth it? Yeah. So, and then being that, as we were discussing, being that I love the entire spectrum of the paranormal, there's a never endless supply that you're going to see a monster sighting, but along the way, there's a historic UFO sighting, or someone reported a crop circle in that area. So I always would go to an anchor, if you will, and then find pieces near it or wherever I happened to be. If I was, back when I had a real career, if you will, of doing other things, if I was in an area for travel for that business, I would hunt out these locations as well.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. It's very similar to what me and my buddies do nowadays with these. You went to Point Pleasant. Did you get over to Flatwoods at all? It's pretty close by. I don't know if you managed to check that out at all. I had the chance to when I was down there.
here's the interesting part. I've been to Mothman several times, spoken at the conference twice, and Flatwoods is one of those on my list that I still haven't been to, where it seems it's so close to Point Pleasant, relatively speaking, but it seems like fate or Mother Nature or something has kept me away from it from all these years. But definitely next time I go out to Point Pleasant, I might even skip Point Pleasant and see the Flatwoods because, I love going to these places over and over and over, but there's nothing new better than the novelty of a new place.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's hard to find those sort of like anchor places like you're talking about. Do you have sort of a bucket list of places that you'd like to go? Cause I'm not, we did, Jesus, what is wrong with me? Alcatraz. Like last summer, we all went out to the Bay Area and checked out Alcatraz. Like, do you have any places that you'd really, I love how international your stuff is, but have you looked at other stuff that you want to get to? I'm sure you must.
There's a place I'm just dying to get to, the Ogopogo Monster, Lake Okanagan up in Canada. And before COVID hit, just a month before COVID hit us, my colleague Kevin Nelson and I were in Alberta, Canada, about 3 hours away from going to see Ogopogo, but we were doing Wendigo research for a book we were doing, and we had such limited time that just couldn't justify taking a 6-hour round trip away from our research. And then of course COVID hit, and I was just kicking myself ever since. But yeah, I have a list of places that obviously I just haven't been yet. And I love traveling overseas quite a bit, but there are so many legends here in America where it's easier to get to. It's inexpensive compared to overseas travel, that I think a legend tripper of any means anywhere in the country can find something in their region that either is a day trip or just an overnight camping or something. That's what I love in today's world with the internet and all the books that have been written, that if you do a little digging, you'll find something in your region where maybe it's not in the cards for you to go to Transylvania this year, but it might not be that weird to go an hour away from your house.
Yeah, there's a lot. Jason Offit, my friend Jason Offit, wrote a book about something like within 100 miles or something like that, or within an hour drive of your. There's all kinds of weird shit like all over the place. I'm really struck too. You're like I want to say like the third or fourth guest we've had on recently from Wisconsin. It's a rich state with weirdness and also with community. It seems. It's like I said, I've been kind of fishing. It's a good example, a good metaphor you used earlier, but it's like I've been kind of fishing around for different states, different people from different states who can kind of represent and eventually maybe put it all together into sort of a that I've had it all, interview all these different people from different states and represent all. And it's like Wisconsin's so rich with people. It's like, holy shit, there's tons of people in Wisconsin. Some of these other states, it's kind of hard to find anyone. What is it about Wisconsin that makes it so strange?
I think several things, and you're right. I was just in Galena, Illinois this previous weekend and at a ghost conference, and I was talking to some fellow Wisconsinites about just how many researchers we have here. And I think it's a combination of things of Wisconsin, that we have a lot of different terrain. We have farmland. We have rolling hills of the driftless area that the glaciers missed. We have tons of lakes. We have heavily forested northwoods, but we have big cities as well. So I think that all plays into everything we have, from goatmen creatures to werewolves to sea serpents, pancake aliens coming, trading pancakes with people. Yeah. But also I think it's something about the people themselves, that there's something about that Midwestern morals, if you will, where people seem to be open to discuss these things, where in other states, you don't necessarily get that because people think you might be crazy or lost your mind or what is that person thinking? But also we have a lot of people here collecting these stories, where it might be in Connecticut, they're experiencing all sorts of things, but nobody's there to record them, or nobody's there to document and write about them. And we were lucky to have, people like Linda Godfrey and others before her, chronicling these stories, and that just spread. And, these legends grew out of that. So I think it's a combination of our terrain, our geography, but also our people. And just, we got lucky and have a lot of researchers here.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And like, yeah, as you were rattling those off, it was like, yeah, I mean, it's got Dogman, it's got the Symington case, it's got the 3 UFO capitals. It's like that. It's really pretty crazy. Like when you kind of drill down into it, it's like, yeah, if I was looking at states, besides the big states, but like, like I always see like Pennsylvania is kind of another one that's like super rich with stuff and researchers and crazy cases and everything. It's like some of these states really stand out among the rest, and Wisconsin definitely is one of them.
I think so, and it's getting a lot of interest because, as I said, researchers are putting out stuff from the Hodag to lumberjack legends. We have a lot of gangster history from the Prohibition days. We have indigenous folklore here, so we have quite a bit of it, and sometimes places get overlooked. I'm fascinated in the paranormal field of what cases get a lot of publicity and a lot of media attention, because there's some where it was a one-off event. Somebody saw something once and was never really spotted again, but yet it grew to huge proportions. And then you come across this other legend where people have been seeing it for hundreds of years and nobody knows about it.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm fascinated by that as well. And a great example is Canada. That Canada has so many legends, but here in the US, we don't really hear about them. It's changing a bit. You have Morgan Knudsen up there and Mike Brown doing research, but for the most part, well, I guess here in America, we're focused on America more than anything, but our legends, we want to know what's right around us. So, but Canada is a whole different show. I grew up in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, and I thought I knew what forests and Northwoods were until I got to Canada, and then I realized they're doing it the right way. That it's hard to even fathom how desolate a lot of the non-cities in Canada, the land is. It's just huge, just sprawling forest and woods. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And you're right about it's weird. It's like a mental border or something. Cause I don't even, there must be, I hope, like some people up in Canada who are doing the Bigfoot research and everything, because Canada has a rich history of Bigfoot stuff. But yeah, it's like people do it. It gets missed. It does get missed, which is remarkable because it's right there next to us. The whole, it's pretty weird.
Well, I understand that too. When I was in college, broke college student, I'd get a book about ghosts of the U.S. and I'd immediately flip to my state because it didn't even dawn on me that I might be able to, travel to North Dakota and see some ghosts. You don't even think of that. So I think everybody starts local and then just kind of slowly spreads out. And then if you're fortunate enough to be able to travel to other countries, it spreads from there. And then you kind of catch the bug and there's no coming back from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, one of the places you kind of have we have several, but one that's like would be like definitely a bucket list for me is Loch Ness. Like just the mystique of it all and the lore and everything. Like, tell me a little bit about your experience going over there.
Man, so I've only had the opportunity to go there twice. I say that I don't care if you hate sea serpents. If you go to Loch Ness, you're going to get swept up in it. It's just an absolutely gorgeous place in the Scottish Highlands. If you get dropped off from a helicopter, let's say, and you parachuted down, you'd think you landed in heaven. It's just, and you just walk around the edges of the loch and start talking to people, and you see how this legend grew, and you see that this is a place of history and mystery. The fog rolls in, and you put your foot in Loch Ness and you think that was a mistake because it was so cold that, I mean, when I first put my feet in Loch Ness, I grew up here in Wisconsin and I thought I knew cold lakes, but it was like needles being smashed into your foot. It was so cold, and you realize, yeah, there's probably not a lot of water skiing in Loch Ness going on, but it just has a magical place that at any moment your kind of head is on a swivel because you think, Sure, a sea serpent could pop up right there. And I think it's a magical place that even if you're the most skeptical person about sea serpents, if you go to Loch Ness, you'll have a wonderful time, regardless of whether or not a sea serpent is dwelling there. But, in the depths.
It sounds magical. Yeah. Like almost like Roswell in a way, I imagine. Roswell's another place I've been meaning to get to, but that one's a little different.
You can almost feel the history, if that makes sense, that just seeping in, that just sitting on the shoreline by yourself. Just, I spend a lot of time just wandering, hiking out to a location where no tourists were or anything, and just sitting there watching and just thinking of the history of the place and imagining what it would have been like 200 years ago and camped along the shoreline. And for me, that was my favorite part.
Yeah. I mean, it's to me, it's like, that's one of the big ones, like the pyramids. Like that's one. It's like, like if they were like, if I won the lottery tomorrow, it'd be like, all right, Loch Ness, pyramids, we're going, wherever, all the biggest places. But yeah, that would be one of them. It's pretty, it's just pretty awesome. How could you not? Yeah, I guess people are skeptical about sea serpents, but how could you not? I love all this stuff, right? I mean, how could you not?
Well, let me ask you this. If you put up a Mount Rushmore of supernatural legends, I mean, Loch Ness has to be on there.
Certainly, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I don't know what else you would put on there.
I mean, an alien, a Bigfoot, a ghost, I guess. And yeah, I suppose, I think Nessie would make the cut. Certainly, that would be the one that's like debatable. But people will write in now and be like, "No, it's Mothman." But no, Nessie has the history. It's it's pretty. Yeah, it's funny. It's like Nessie and Bigfoot are like the two iconic, the two big daddies of the field, and then the other ones are all kind of fighting for scraps, like Mothman and Dog. What do you think of Dogman? Now you're Wisconsin. You're a Wisconsin man. It's a really interesting. I always talk about this. I had the late Linda Godfrey, God rest her soul, wonderful woman. And she's the one who put this idea in my head because I saw her at Lauren Coleman's conference a few years back. And she was like, it doesn't make sense that this thing can walk on these dog legs. Like even Linda Godfrey, who put the dog man on the map, is like befuddled by the dog leg conundrum. It's really quite something to, it's very, and I mean, it's like, I think you're kind of the same mindset that I am, where it's like, yeah, whatever. I can't explain it, but it is rather weird. It is kind of like, how is this? Maybe this is more supernatural than just a dog like running around on 2 feet.
I completely agree. And I think anybody who digs into the field of dogman research, at least in my opinion, you start to come to the possibility that it's maybe not a flesh and blood animal like we think of a moose or a bear, or at least it isn't the entire time.
Yeah.
And Linda was the first to bring me to Bray Road. And I we lived close to each other and we're great friends. So I had a lot of time to pick her brain and go over things. And I think at the end of her life, and I don't want to speak for her, but she was really open to the possibility of this thing being something else. Mm-hmm. That there was just too many stories she would get from people, and too many witnesses that have talked to me that see it doing things it shouldn't do, whether it's moving at speeds that no known animal can do, or simply kind of vanishing right in front of people, that tracks leave off to nowhere. And some have proposed that there might even be some sort of portal out at the Bray Road area and the farmland out there. But the idea that it's just there as a dog man, unlike a werewolf, it doesn't change back and forth from a human to a wolf. It's a dog person is presumably the entire time. That the idea that where it's seen in some of these places aren't big enough to house some unknown cryptid of that size, some biped running around on its hind legs that just isn't encountered every single day or on a trail cam. So, I've come to the conclusion, or at least the belief, that, I lean more toward these things possibly being something not flesh and blood, or at least not the way we know of them. And maybe I'm wrong, and I'm not diehard about it, because Dogman, it seems like the Dogman camp, more so than any other Bigfoot or Chupacabra or whatever, are in the camp of like, it's flesh and blood, it's a real thing, we need to go hunt it, we need to trap it.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah. The hardcores, they never like it when you mention the possibility that it might be supernatural, paranormal. Same, the Bigfoot people kind of, I think, have begrudgingly accepted that as a possibility because they've heard it so often. But yeah, the dog, I can see how the dog folks are like, no, we're not even going to open that door. But
yeah, and for me,
it could be supernatural. Kind of like, I'll let you get it, but I was thinking this, it connects in a way to what we were talking about earlier about the trapper and the mermaid. Like I was saying, where it's like, okay, maybe whatever this force is, like, it's not going to manifest as a mermaid in that situation. As someone who sees a dog man, like, it comes in the context of the time and the setting. So it's like, all right, what am I going to be to freak out this person? I'm going to be a fucking werewolf. And then it just pops up and fucks with them, and then it's gone,
Years ago, and I completely agree with that, almost like a trickster. Or maybe playing off your biggest fear. Who knows what it's feeding off of? But years ago, it used to be that if 4 people were in a car and they saw a creature or a UFO, and you had them all document what they saw separately, and if all 4 of them saw the same thing, it was given more credibility.
Right.
That, if somebody said the UFO was red and someone else said it was blue, you're like, oh, there you go. There's so many differences. They don't even know. They're making it up. They don't know what they're doing. Where today I see that as exactly what you were just referring to, that people perceive it different. And I've ran into so many people who've been in a carload where maybe 2 people saw something and the other 2 simply couldn't even see it or didn't experience it.
Right. Yeah. I've heard stories like of ghost stories where someone will see one type of thing and then someone will see something else. And it's like, well, how do you explain that? But that to me, again, like what you're saying, that gives it more credibility in a sense, because it's like, this is a perception thing. So of course it would be different.
Yeah, I truly believe that. And again, this was 20, 30 years ago, but we added so much credibility if the witnesses' stories all mimicked one another. Whereas now that's been kind of blown up. But I've said this so many times over the years that when you're dealing with the weird, what is too weird? Where do you draw that line? Because for a lot of people in the Bigfoot field, and maybe dogmen too, they won't even entertain the possibility of other explanations because it's too weird. But for me, I found that if I would have ever drew a line that said this is too weird, I would have missed out on a lot of great legends. Are vampires too weird? Are, werewolves too weird? Are mermaids too weird? Where do you draw that line of, well, I believe in ghosts, but I don't believe in such and such?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's very, This reminded me of a story. I went to a flat earth convention and the flat earthers thought I was crazy because I believe in UFOs. So it's like, it's people get hooked on their thing, and that's their thing. Now, one of the videos you have on your website, I think this is like a part of a series of things that you've done. We sat in something called the Death Chair of Riverside Cemetery. It sounds like you're willing to to try these urban I don't know what you'd call them, fucking deadly urban legends, where it's like, if you touch this thing 3 times, you'll burst into flames. And then there's like a video of you and like you're like doing it. So, but one of these is the Death Chair. But just talk to me about the Death Chair and doing some of these other like weird, deadly urban legends.
So I did a book on supernatural dares, and it's exactly what you were saying, that these are things usually surrounding some supernatural location where you have to do something in order for the legend to come true. You have to knock 3 times on a mausoleum before the spirit will knock back, or you roll down a hill and a portal to hell will open up for you. Those type of things. And one of my favorites is in Marshalltown, Iowa, and it's a cemetery called Riverside Cemetery. And they have all sorts of legends here, but the main one involves this old concrete chair called the devil's chair, the cursed chair, the death chair, the witch's chair. And little is known about this chair. That records have been lost, the history of why it's there, who bought it, who it's a memorial for. It's just a concrete chair that you can go sit in the graveyard and pay your respects to loved ones and such. But for decades, people talked that if you sat in this chair or stood on it or merely touched it, you'd be cursed with bad luck until the day you die. Mishap, misfortune, and death. And I would hear from people who said, we sat in the chair and I broke up with my significant other. I lost my employment. We were in a car accident. My friend died. All bad things that will happen. And and nobody knows why. And there's several variations to the death chair in Riverside Cemetery, that if you sit there on your birthday, you'll die, or that if you do it at midnight or go there at Halloween. So there are all these variations, but the gist of the story is if you sit there, bad things will befall you. And I talked to a woman after a program I did in Marshalltown, and she came up and said, when I was a young girl, our Girl Scout group went out to the cemetery to see the chair as a part of local history project. And I thought, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But she said, of course, none of the little girls wanted to sit in the chair except one brave little girl. And then, so the lady told me, fast forward a few decades, and they had recently had a reunion for all the Girl Scouts, and everyone showed up to the reunion except one woman who had died. And probably can guess which one. It was that girl who sat in the chair when she was young. So these Girl Scouts passed the legend on that, don't ever sit in the chair. And the cemetery itself is one of those where it seems to be one of these window areas or portals, or because right down the path from the devil's chair, the death chair, is a crypt, an old mausoleum where it is said a man buried his wife in there. The problem was she was alive when he buried her, and now she can be heard, knocking from the inside and saying, help me, get me out. I can't breathe. Save me. And people see the handle of the crypt moving on its own. And then, so for years I would talk about these stories, and then this is the way folklore works. After a different program in the area, a woman came up and said, I used to play in that cemetery all the time. My dad and my uncle would always tell me about a monkey wolf that lived there.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, that's my thought. And so and her father, her father and uncle had passed on, and she said, they never really said much about it, that it was just half monkey, half wolf. And she said, I never kind of questioned it. Like, where'd it come from? What is it? What's it eat? Is it going to harm me? Yeah. And she said she regretted it because they're both passed now. But so you have a story like that of the local legend. I don't know if they were spinning yarns to the kid just to have a little fun in the cemetery, but they made it seem like they had grown up too with the story of the monkey wolf. So I throw that out there in hopes that other people from the area would say, yeah, I heard that story, or yeah, that's a well-known neighborhood legend.
That would be amazing. Jesus, the monkey wolf. Yeah. Wow. Now, I've complained about this on the show before, and we're a very litigious society, so I don't want to encourage anyone to do this. But crop circles, man, I really wish there were more American crop circles. It's like, regardless of how they're made, which that's why I'm saying that, don't say you did it because Binnall told you to go and make a crop circle, folks. But it would be so awesome to wake up one day and there's like a fucking crop circle somewhere in Wisconsin or wherever. It's like you never see them. It's very, very disappointing.
I just had this conversation, and basically it was the same thing. Where the heck did all the crop circles go?
Yeah.
Remember in the 1980s and 90s? Every TV show, every documentary on TV was about crop formations. People were wearing T-shirts of them. Books were out. People had posters of crop formations. And then I've been to maybe a dozen of formations through the Midwest over the years, but I can't tell you the last time I was at one, whether it was hoaxed or not.
Yeah.
You just don't hear of them anymore. And either the hoaxers got bored or whatever natural phenomena or unnatural phenomena was causing them has shifted and maybe lost interest. But I don't know. But for years, that was the biggest thing going. You'd have researchers like Nancy Talbot of BLT Research going from conference to conference talking about these, and Dr. Levengood doing the studies of the soil and the crop samples themselves.
Yeah, it was big time. Yeah.
Yeah, where'd it go?
Yeah. I don't know, man. We're getting old because it's like the 70s mysteries like Bermuda Triangle is out of fashion. Spontaneous combustion, that's out of fashion. Now it's like, now even crop circles are moving in. Now they're on the classic rock station of the paranormal. It's like, wow, we're getting old, man. It's crazy.
I know. I really want to do a big article on these, and I was thinking about them the other day, that almost these extinct phenomena of whether it's rods, if you remember rods being huge,
rods,
and electronic street light interference, where forever people were talking about walking under street lights and they'd go out and they could trigger them and all this stuff. And
there was a book on it, Sliders.
Yeah. So I suppose with, like anything, with more legends coming in every year, some have to die out, I guess.
Yeah. You get well, it's like, I was talking about this with somebody recently too. It's like the black-eyed kids. That's like a thing that was like and that was like an early turn of the century thing. Now it's like, it's been a long time since I heard anyone really even talking about black-eyed kids. But for a little while there, it was like all anyone was talking about. The dog man stuck, though. The dog man stuck around. That was one that kind of entered the zeitgeist in recent years, and it's still kicking. But like the Fresno pants. You've seen that? That's kind of a weird new one that's kind of popped in.
Yeah, someone was just asking at a conference the other weekend I was at, bemoaning the fact that there's no new folklore being created. And I had to take a step back and disagree, because there's tons of new, from Slender Man to here in Wisconsin. There's a story of Doveland, Wisconsin, that people remember going to it. They remember their distant relatives living there. They remember restaurants. They have T-shirts from there, but for the rest of us, it never existed, never been on any map. Nobody's ever heard of it, but people claim that they've been there. So it's a new piece of folklore coming up, or the back rooms. I don't know if you're familiar with the back rooms.
Yeah.
So
back rooms.
Yeah, these stories, folklore is still continuing today. Sometimes, they're more online than others, or they're completely made up competitions like Slender Man, but they're still happening.
Yeah, exactly. And stuff's being unearthed, like the Van Meter visitor, and also like over in Loveland, they've really kind of given new life to the Frogman character or creature or whatever. It's like that, that's old folklore, but it's like got a fresh coat of paint, and it's really catching people's attention now. So there's stuff out there. I think as more communities become more open to the idea of being like, hey, we could be like Roswell, we could be like Point Pleasant, or like it's happened here in New England, Exeter, when they first started doing the UFO conference, like nobody wanted anything to do with it. Now it's like the biggest thing that happens in town every year, and everybody's on board with it because it brings in thousands of people and everything. So I think as more communities start embracing their local lore, we'll find out maybe about other stuff that we hadn't really, like the Momo story. That's kind of one that's if you're into Bigfoot and creatures and stuff like that, we know about it, but like to a wider thing, maybe Momo is going to get a moment in the sun or something like that.
And giving these legends the attention, you start finding that it might not have been as one-off or two-off as we thought. Like the Van Meter visitor, when we started digging, we started finding that people had stories from the 1980s and beyond, all the way up to modern day accounts in that area or that region of Iowa of seeing some large creature, but because it had been forgotten or only focused on the 1903 sightings, that people forget that oftentimes these stories continue. So I love when you mentioned like Jeff Craig and the rest doing the Loveland Frog revival stuff, where all of a sudden I think you're going to start digging up more stories that are more recent than the original sightings that took place.
That's entirely possible. Yeah. Especially now people are more willing to talk about it. You might find someone who comes forward and is like, yeah, I saw the frog thing too. I just didn't want to say anything back then, and maybe they'll have some kind of insight. Who knows? Yeah, that's another sort of bucket place list I'd like to check out someday. Get down into the frogman territory. Now, do you find you do haunted places too, which is interesting because, like, I don't know, I don't do well with haunted places. Nothing. I kind of am like what you were saying before. I need to like shed this. Like, well, nothing happens. I get kind of like bored when nothing happens after a while. But it's like some of them with the rich history are quite fun to visit. Like, especially if they're like, they have a history where you're like, okay, I could definitely see that this would be haunted.
I'm with you there too, that even if nothing happens, if you're at a cool historical location with an amazing background and history to it, it's a lot more fun than, I don't know, here in Wisconsin, we have a story of a Subway restaurant being haunted and, big deal, where,
yeah.
But when you're at, let's say an old funeral parlor or something, or castle or something, where you can fill in that lack of anything that might not happen with the history, the atmosphere, just the architecture. That's I think a springboard for a lot of this is people get interested in the ghost stories and that, and then all of a sudden they become interested in local history. And I have a lot of my programs I do at libraries where all of a sudden, school kids, middle school and high school will say, well, we took on the legend of the old abandoned farmhouse as a local history project. And they get hooked on that or the architecture. So I think that if you can bring in more of those interests, you're less likely to be disappointed if nothing happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And well, first of all, I was looking at your books, dude. And like I said, your resume is just tremendous. I can't even go through all these books. There's tons of them, folks. Get on Amazon, put in Chad Lewis, and you'll see it. Go on to chadlewisresearch.com to check out the site, because that's also where I'm looking at. Like, you are a prolific speaker, dude. You are you're all over the place. I'm just looking here this month, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 libraries you're doing talks at. I mean, hats off to you, dude. I don't know how you do it. I don't know if I'd have the energy to do that. It's really an awesome thing. And I'm sure you hear a lot of crazy stories as you're going to these places. You're talking about Wisconsin's gangster history and also circus legends and lore at some of these public libraries throughout Minnesota and Wisconsin just this month. And there's tons more throughout the whole year. Like, I'm just scrolling. It's really insane. The schedule you keep. How do you keep it up?
Well, that's the key. That, like, tomorrow I'll be heading to a library up in the Northwoods of Wisconsin where there's a legend I haven't seen yet of a grave that you can look into. There's like a little telescope type thing above the grave that you can look in down to it. So when I go to these places to speak, I'm also researching as well. And nice. For the last 30 years, I've done nearly 200 programs or lectures a year. Wow. At historical societies, universities, libraries, and the conferences and the like. So you figure 30 years times 200 programs, where I remember reading one of the obituaries of Stanton Friedman, the UFO researcher.
Oh yeah.
And I just have to say, one of my favorite lectures I've ever seen was by Stanton. And the newspaper, the obituary listed that he had done 74 lectures on UFOs throughout his career. And I kind of chuckled to myself and I thought, 74 this month, you mean?
Yeah.
Because that's more on my schedule. Yeah. But I thought that was funny, but yeah. But that, for me, that's a tremendous source of collecting these stories, because if you do a lecture with 50, 100 people there, 20, 30 years ago, nobody wanted to tell a story. They'd look around to make sure no one was listening and say, well, I don't really believe in UFOs, but this is what I saw. Yeah. Where now you ask for stories after a program and 20, 30 people may raise their hand wanting to tell you their legend. So it's a never ending source of finding stuff. And like you said, all of a sudden I was doing haunted places, and I noticed a lot of them had gangster stories to them, where the Prohibition gangsters hung out, or a lot of them had old lumberjack stories of the jackalope and other creatures. So it just kind of spread my interest from just strictly paranormal to paranormal adjacent.
Yes. Yes, I like that, because I think you've been in this longer than I have, which is saying something, because I've been in this a long time too. It's not scary. But yeah, you get kind of. I was joking with my friends because they were like, "What the fuck are you going to a flat Earth conference for?" And I sort of do different stuff in a way than you. I don't do as much legend tripping as I would love to do more, but I tie down working all the time, so it's. But I'm like, look, man, I've been in this for all these years. Like, I gotta, like, I'm like immune or something. Like, I gotta get a new high. Like, I need a new high, man. Like, I'm gonna just go and hang out with flat earthers, because I already know all the other stuff. I already know all the people in the ghost world and all the people in the UFO and the Bigfoot people. It's like, I need a new supply, man, of weird. It's like, so that's like I'm mixed up with the flat earthers. Now, tell me. So yeah, so that's what it is. You like get these peripheral things and stuff, and I've also kind of like really been into like nostalgia legends and things of that nature. That's why I mentioned spontaneous human combustion. But talk a little bit about the circus legends and lore, because I'm fascinated by like subcultures and circus subcultures. So it's just so cool.
People today have no idea that in the 1800s and even through the early 1900s, the circuses were the kings in America. Yeah. They were by far the most popular entertainment, bar none. When the circus came to town, businesses shut down, banks closed, schools released all of their kids to go enjoy the circus. Even local capitals, Congress your local legislatures would close down for everyone would go see the circus. It was a huge deal. For months, they'd been advertising it with all of their plastered on billboards and banners and flyers. And it was unlike anything. And remember, this was at a time when people have never seen an elephant in real life. And all of a sudden, the circus pulls in with 15 elephants and 200 other animals. It was like, well, I can stay on the farm and read until my candle burns out, or I can go into the circus. And I'm fascinated not only just by the traditional circus legends, but the legends that involve the supernatural as well, where some of these circus animals died in train accidents, and they're thought to haunt the places they once were. Here in Wisconsin, we have a story of a place called Haunchyville, where circus performers, little people, were said to have killed their manager in Florida. So they escaped here to Wisconsin and set up a community in Muskego, Wisconsin, by a lake and a forest. And it was said they built all these, half-sized houses, and they had an average sized man protecting them with a shotgun, and they were called the Haunchies. And you'd go to Haunchyville, and I talked to the sheriffs in that area, and they said they made thousands of dollars every year off of trespassing tickets of people looking for Haunchyville. So I love these stories, and it's the same reason I joined the Hobo Union years ago, is I love these subcultures of all these beliefs and stories, because again, they all kind of exist in that same realm as the supernatural.
Now, wait a minute. I have to ask, what is the Hobo Union and how do you join? Because if anyone, I feel like I want to be a part of the Hobo Union. What is this?
So the Hobo Union, it's just amazing. I joined it a while back because every year they have.
Do I have to kill a guy?
No, every year in Britt, Iowa, they have the National UFO Hobo Days or Hobo Convention. It started in Chicago, and it's the tourist union, but it's union number 63. And the legend is that they were sitting around the jungle, which is where the hobos congregated by the railroad tracks. It was called the jungle. And there were 63 of them in the Chicago area sitting around one night saying, everywhere we go, we get harassed, arrested for vagrancy, for loitering. We need to come up with a union so that when we go to a town and the police harassed us, we can say, we're not loitering. We're looking for work. We're union workers. Do you know of any positions open? So there were 63. So they said, let's call it Tourist Union number 63. And every year for 100 and some plus years, they've been meeting every year at the hobo conference. And you don't need to be a hobo to go there, and anyone can join, because today there are all sorts of types of hobos. You might be the old leather hobo where you're walking everywhere and riding the rails, but you could also be a rubber hobo living in your car or road tripping or the van life.
Okay.
So there's no, hobos have expanded over the years as well. That again, it used to be you had to ride the rails to be a hobo, but today that's nearly impossible with the way the railroads are set up. They don't even have open train cars. So yeah, you can join. When I joined, it was $5 a year. No benefits except being in the hobo. You get a card saying you're an official member of the hobo union. If anyone sees pictures on my website of me, I'll always be wearing a satchel on the side, my bag on the side of me. And in the corner, there's this bright black and white 63 patch on there. And people often ask what it is. And I said, that's the Hobo Union 63. So, but they had their own language. They had their own symbols that they would put on like a mailbox saying the person live here has a gun, or tell them a sad story. They'll give you a meal. And I'm just fascinated by these. And of course, I mean, you can't get more haunted than railroads. Every town has a haunted railroad story.
Yeah. Hobos, man. Yeah, shit. Have you written a book yet about the hobos?
I've done several articles. I've spoken several times at the Hobo Festival, and people take this seriously in Britt, Iowa. There, where they have a hobo cemetery where people want to be buried when they die with their fellow hobos. Sometimes leaving their friends and family behind in their local cemetery to be shipped to Iowa to be buried, and people get married at Hobo Festival. It's
I got to look into this. Yeah, I got to look into this hobo thing.
You sound like a member you need to join.
Yeah. This sounds like my spiritual brotherhood. Oh man, that's interesting. I got to look into this. Well, Chad, I can't thank you enough, dude, for coming on the show. This has been just a blast. I had so much fun. I think I mentioned to you before I started, I was talking to Steve Berg before we taped this show, and he was like, oh, tell Chad I said hi. You're going to love Chad. You're going to have so much fun. And he was absolutely right. I had an absolute blast here, man. This was so much fun. And it's cool to talk to a fellow traveler. You've done so much more than I have. And like I said, I like to think that I have a pretty good paranormal passport. But as I looked into your stuff, I'm like, holy shit, this guy, he gets around, man. He's done all kinds of stuff and checked out all kinds of things. And like, we only scratched the surface here. Like I said, before we started the show, it's going to be like a greatest hits, like we usually do when we have first time guests on, because you've just done so much stuff. The new book is Supernatural Lake Superior, and you can find out more on Chad Lewis at chadlewisresearch.com. I get the feeling this is not the last time you're going to be on Binnall of America, man. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. It was an absolute blast, brother.
Hey, thank you. I feel like we could sit down and chat for days on end, but thanks for having me, and keep an eye out.
Absolutely.